It's time for a questions episode where I take nuanced fashion questions from Instagram and answer them, like this one. When visiting a store, should you not try anything on if you're not planning on buying anything? Okay, we've talked about this before. I feel like it's very important to reemphasize. You are allowed to try on clothes and then not buy anything. You're allowed to do this. I have worked in high-end retail before. I have been a sales manager at a store. So I'm gonna give you a couple of tips to maybe make you feel a little bit more comfortable. One, just clean up after yourself. Like if you go in to try on like 4 or 5 things, let's get the shirts back onto the hanger. Let's button them all the way back up exactly the way that they had them before. If you can, walk back out of the dressing room with it and put it back where you found it. Be considerate, clean up after yourself. 2, try to go into stores when they're not overtly busy. The only time when it really would be annoying if someone was just excited to try on a bunch of clothes and then was just sort of like, bye, would be like a Saturday at 3 p.m. But if you go in at like 11 a.m. on a Thursday, it's probably not going to be all that busy, and then it's just much more open, and honestly, the sales reps are probably just bored. Last step, just talk with the sales staff. Now, if somebody is acting like a dick and is just sort of like, hi, that is on them. So if somebody is like giving you attitude, which, I mean, I still experience at stores all the time, you know what? It doesn't matter. If somebody's rude to you, that's on them. But yeah, there is no expectation that you go in there and buy something. What do you think makes Nick Knight and Tim Walker's fashion photography styles so unique? That's a super good question. I've seen a lot of stuff by Tim Walker, but I am much more familiar with the body of work by Nick Knight, so I will speak for him. Not like for him. Nick is so eloquent, I would never dare. Fashion photography kind of gets limited by the fact that it's serving a purpose, like any medium of art that is ultimately in service to a function. Because if you're just saying like, I'm an art photographer, then you can go out and you can take a picture of something and it's out of focus. You could take a picture of something and it's overexposed. It's kind of like, whatever you want to do, you're the art photographer. But in fashion photography, there does have to be some boxes that get checked in almost every case. You have to be able to clearly see the clothes. Usually the person needs to be facing towards the camera so that you can see the outfit in its entirety. That gets a little bit looser and more artistic, and you get a little bit more freedom when you go into fashion editorial photography, which is what Nick Knight specializes in. But even then, I mean, a brand that is entrusting you with their clothes is probably not going to want to entrust you with their clothes in the future if you are not photographing them well. But I think the reason that Nick Knight stands apart so much is that he really treats every shoot as if it's its own big project. Now, a lot of that does come with a pretty sizable budget. So, I mean, it's not like I could look at someone who's an aspiring fashion photographer and say, you just got to think harder about these projects, man. Because I don't think you could do stuff like this if you're just playing around with a camera and your friends at your parents' house. I think it just comes down to him and his team thinking very deeply about how can we introduce something photographically that hasn't been seen before. I'm sure that takes a lot of trial and error. Good question. What is your favorite fabric or material? Oh boy. Well, the default answer there is just wool. But I gave that answer last time I was asked this question, so I kind of want to come up with something else. Oh, okay, so I just learned about this fabric. If anyone has ever been around a Carol Christian pole suit, the material on that suit feels unlike anything that I've ever felt before. You feel it, and it has what I've been told is described as a dry hand. It's almost papery. It's so dry. I found out that this comes from combining a really naturally dry fiber called rami and then mixing that with cotton. And we're talking, by the way, about the kind of cotton that would get used in shirting like this, or like in a suit, not necessarily like hoodie cotton. If you feel a wool and then you feel a cotton, you'll be like, oh yeah, like the wool almost feels like wet or softer, but the cotton like feels flatter. It feels more like it would make a sound when you move it around and stuff. But yeah, I had never heard about rami before, but it's apparently when it's combined with cotton, it feels unlike anything else that I've ever felt before. It's incredible. Okay, Bliss. Why is your Patreon so incredible? I am ignoring my obligations to work and family so that I can watch all of the exclusive episodes and spend so much time with your Discord community. Man, it's so great. I'm glad you asked that question. The Patreon is full of wonderful extended interviews that are unedited with designers that I have interviewed with a microphone. Sign up today. We even have a pretty cheap student tier if you don't have a lot of cash around. Do it now. Is buying secondhand fast fashion clothes still considered supporting fast fashion companies? I don't think so. I mean, no, H&M is not getting any money from you for that. And you're giving those clothes a little bit more of a purpose before it goes into a landfill, so that's awesome. It is kind of a bummer that all this just sort of ends with a landfill, though. I mean, whether it's high-end stuff or low-end stuff, I wasn't saying anything about fast fashion there. It's a bummer that all clothes just sort of end up in a landfill. Are fashion reps okay if you make them yourself and for yourself? Yeah, so we had a lot of responses, a lot of very angry, triggered responses from people who watched the video where I talked about fashion reps. I should have been clearer in that episode that I was not talking about you doing recreations of this stuff yourself at home. There's actually a long history of designers doing that themselves. I mean, Alexander McQueen was known for showing up at school wearing clothes that he had made himself, and when people were like, wow, that's so cool, who makes that? He was like, it's Margiela. But it wasn't Margiela. He was lying. But yeah, I mean, if you're just really inspired by a certain piece that you can't go out and buy, and you just sort of buy some fabric and you make it yourself, that's awesome. Nothing wrong with that. As a quick follow-up to the reps responses, everybody kept saying like, but all of the reps are made in the same factories as the real clothes that are made there. And as soon as someone wants to give me a fact-check news organization that backs that claim up, I will at least see that that is correct. When I tried to Google around for it, at least, all I found was Reddit threads where people were assuring other people that this is fine because it's made in the same factories where the other stuff is made. I would submit maybe that someone is lying to you. Oh, this one's dramatic. Here we go. Fashion is dead. No innovation. Everyone is doing the same. All creative directors are moving. Yes, a lot of people think this. Okay, so here's what my perspective is on this. We're gonna move over to another art form and talk about that so we can kind of compare mediums here for a second. Pretty much at every major touchstone of the development of film as an art form, everyone was decrying that it is dead. When sound was introduced, which obviously killed off the silent picture, oh my gosh, film is dead. Later on, color was introduced. Movies just weren't in black and white anymore. Oh my gosh, that's it. I thought it was dead before. It's really dead now. Later, this actually happened. Later on, home movies were introduced, just like VHSs that you could buy and then watch at home.
Air Power, the video library that lets you feel the thrust of taking off.
Look at how they've massacred my boy. They're killing the film industry. And then streaming happened.
These people are really about to push my buttons.
Oh shit, it happened. Film is dead. Here's the deal. In every era of every art form, there are going to be challenges and there's going to be things that get lost about that art form as culture evolves. And yeah, you can throw up your hands and say, this isn't for me anymore. I valued this much more when people weren't able to speak on camera. That's totally fine. There really is nothing wrong with that. But to act like there is nothing of quality that's being produced now is, in my opinion, insane. And this mentality that, oh, everything was so good just recently, just in the 90s, it was so great. And now it's fucking horrible. There's nothing good. I just don't think that that's true. If you would like to see some quality stuff, I would invite you to watch most of the videos that I make. I feature a lot of artists that I believe in very much. I believe very firmly that in 20 years, there are going to be people who look back and say oh my gosh, you lived through the peak era of Rick Owens. That's crazy. What was that like? Did you get to go to any of the shows? Let's check on the battery. I forgot to bring the charger for my camera today, so I'm having to watch the battery because this might just at any moment. But we're good for right now. We'll bring it back to movies. Who's that guy that made one kind of cool movie and then the rest of it wasn't good? Zack Snyder. When Zack Snyder is coming out, I don't really keep up with movies very much, but when Zack Snyder is coming out with a new movie, I don't think that anybody in the serious film criticism world is all right, I guess we'll see. They understand that Zack Snyder's job is to make a bunch of money for huge studios. And usually people who are serious cinephiles or whatever don't keep up with that stuff because, Marvel movies are doing their Marvel movie thing. In fashion, we have the incredible luxury of being able to keep up with the biggest names in the industry and at least hope that they're going to create something that's very artful and well executed. Does that always happen? No. Sometimes the super commercial houses are very commercial. I don't think we need to get our feelings hurt about that. There aren't any brands that we just consider to be the whole history of that house sucks. I can't think of one. A major luxury company that just is there was no good era, they've never had good output. That's an incredible blessing. Because if you ask a serious film critic, what's a good Zack Snyder movie? Or what's a good guy that made Transformers movie? They would be there isn't one because that guy is just about commercialism. He doesn't make good movies. By comparison, we have it really good in fashion. I don't know. Anyway, that's the end of my little rant there. I love this question. Has there ever been a design that made you mad because of how meaningful it is? I don't know if I've ever been like made mad by it before. I am like a weird crier. I cry at very strange things. Like see a jacket that's like so well executed and like the meaning is like jumping off of the jacket and there's like this whole narrative around it or whatever. I might start crying. None of them have ever made me mad before, but I do want to take that opportunity to talk about the shirt that I'm wearing. I just got this. So this is a Bianca Saunders shirt. I just got it because I really like what Bianca Saunders does with the draping technique thing, this kind of like masculine version of draping where she sort of takes things and sort of gives them a little bit of depth, just a tiny bit of tasteful depth so you can sort of see the way that the texture moves on the shirt. Shadow plaid isn't sewn in, it's a print on the cotton, but the purpose of that is so that it can really like kind of play out this warped effect detail, kind of like scrunching in towards the center. And I didn't even realize this, my fiance had to point this out to me. She was like, oh my gosh, wait, the shirt isn't just doing that abstractly. It looks like when somebody grabs somebody's shirt and is like pulling them forward, like doing a like, hey buddy, like that type of thing. I realized that this is called the Rowdy Shirt. That's such an incredible encapsulation of a moment in a tangible way in a shirt. I love that. What else we got? Do you think that ready-to-wear collections will always remain just jackets, pants, and shirts? I guess you're just talking about menswear. Coats also? Like, for example, I mean, these are just clothes that I have from collecting for 10 years with not a very big budget to collect with. And these are, I mean, they're pretty wacky. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's like everything. There is a limitation of, like painting is done with paints. It's limited by certain constraints, and then you go out as much as you can into those constraints. Are there any good analysis channels / resources that mainly cover women's fashion? Yes, this channel. Seriously though, not to get like too self-promo-y here, but like we've built this channel to be evergreen content. Like even if you just close your eyes, scrolled through all the videos and clicked a random one, even if it's from 2 years ago, the goal is that the information that's in there is not just about that collection, but that you're learning about how fashion functions as an art form overall. Also, if you want some real recommendations, Lizzie Lowe is sick, Tuba Avalon is sick, and I really love Haute Hadil. How much influence do other mediums of art have on fashion? Lots. I think all of the different mediums of art influence each other in a lot of different ways. Because, I mean, different mediums are going to have different constraints, like what we just talked about, where it's like, is it just going to be shirts and pants and coats? Someone who is a fashion designer who looks over at someone who is a statue maker, a sculptor. English is my 5th language, give me a break. If you look over at the constraints that other artists have in different mediums, it can often help you solve the constraints in your own medium better. Plus, there are some fashion designers that are just really fascinated by other visual mediums of art. Like Rei Kawakubo is obviously obsessed with all of the visual arts. Like studio art is her big thing. You can see that in a lot of her work. Jonathan Anderson for the recent Loewe show got really inspired by a painter that he met. And then there was that one Y Project show where Glenn Martins got really inspired by this terrible tattoo that he saw on this guy at a party. And it became that. The tattoo became that. Just an artfully bad tattoo. So sick. Okay, thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye now.